The water was a sheet of cool blue silk against Amelia's skin. It was the first truly hot day of June, the kind of day that made her $1.2 million mortgage feel less like a crushing weight and more like a well-deserved indulgence. The pool, enclosed by a pristine 6-foot white vinyl fence, was her private oasis, a sanctuary carved out of the manicured perfection of Northwood Estates. She floated on her back, eyes closed against the buttery afternoon sun, the scent of chlorine and blooming magnolias filling the air. This was it. This was the peace she'd worked 60-hour weeks for, the quiet she'd craved after the noisy chaos of her city apartment. A sharp, metallic clang shattered the tranquility. Amelia's eyes snapped open. The sound had come from the fence separating her property from the one to the east. She saw a flash of floral print through the slats. "Can I help you?" Amelia called out, treading water. The floral print moved, and a woman's face appeared in the narrow gap between two panels. She was in her late 50s, with a helmet of stiff blonde hair and a mouth set in a permanent thin line of disapproval. Her eyes, magnified by gold-rimmed glasses, raked over Amelia from head to toe. "I'm Karen," the woman announced, her voice as crisp and brittle as autumn leaves. "Karen Becker. I live next door." "Amelia Vance," she replied, offering a polite smile. "Nice to meet you." Karen did not return the sentiment. Her gaze lingered on Amelia's black bikini. "I'm the head of the Neighborhood Welcome Committee and the lead coordinator for the HOA's Decency and Aesthetics Board." Amelia's smile tightened. Decency and Aesthetics Board? It sounded like something out of a dystopian novel. "Oh, well, welcome to me, I guess." Karen ignored the joke. "I wanted to have a word with you about your attire." Amelia blinked, the chlorine stinging her eyes. "My attire?" She looked down at her bikini, a perfectly normal, moderately cut two-piece. "You mean my swimsuit?" "We have standards." "In Northwood," Karen said, her voice dripping with condescension. "This is a family community. There are children. We expect a certain level of modesty. That thing is hardly modest. It's practically lingerie." Amelia felt a surge of disbelief, followed by a hot flash of anger. She had dealt with overbearing clients, sexist bosses, and mansplaining colleagues for 15 years to earn. This pool. She wasn't about to be policed in her own backyard by a woman named Karen with a made-up decency title. "With all due respect, Karen," Amelia said, her voice losing its warmth. "I'm on my private property, behind a privacy fence. What I wear to swim in my own pool is my business." Karen's nostrils flared. "It becomes my business when it lowers the moral character of the neighborhood. Your fence has gaps. People can see. My husband was watering the hydrangeas just now and was quite startled." "I'm sure he'll recover," Amelia said, her tone sharp as glass. She turned to swim away, a clear dismissal. "I'll be filing a report with the HOA," Karen called after her. "There are bylaws against indecent exposure." Amelia didn't grace her with a response. She dove under the water, the cool pressure a welcome relief from the woman's suffocating presence. When she surfaced, the floral print dress was gone. But the sense of being watched lingered, a greasy film on her perfect day. The report was just the beginning. 2 days later, a certified letter arrived from the Northwood Homeowners Association. It was a formal warning citing Bylaw 17, Section 2, C, Public Nuisance and Offensive Displays. Her inappropriate swimwear had been deemed a potential violation. It was signed, of course, by Karen Becker. Chair of the DAB, Amelia shredded the letter and threw it in the recycling bin. She then went online and ordered 3 new bikinis, each one smaller than the last. It was petty, she knew, but she refused to be intimidated. The next Saturday, as she lay on a lounger reading a novel, a small drone buzzed over the fence. It hovered 20 feet above her, its camera lens a tiny, unblinking eye. Amelia stared at it, her heart pounding with rage. It floated there for a full minute before zipping back over the fence. There was no doubt in her mind who was piloting it. She called the police. An officer came, a young man who looked bored and tired. He took her statement, went next door to speak with Karen, and came back 10 minutes later shrugging. "Ma'am, Mrs. Becker claims it was a misunderstanding," he said, avoiding her eyes. "She says her grandson was flying his new toy and lost control of it. She apologizes for any disturbance." "She was spying on me," Amelia insisted. "It's harassment." Without proof she was the one controlling it, or that she was recording you, there's not much we can do, the officer said apologetically. "It's a civil matter, really." The harassment escalated. Her morning newspaper would be mysteriously soaked with sprinkler water. She'd find small bags of dog waste tossed into her perfectly manicured flower beds. Twice she came home from work to find her garbage cans, which she kept in a tidy enclosure by her garage, had been tipped over, their contents strewn across her driveway. Each time she knew it was Karen, but there was never any proof. The woman was a ghost, a suburban phantom of passive aggression. Amelia installed security cameras, but the incidents stopped as soon as they went up, as if Karen was waiting for her to make a move, only to counter it with infuriating plausible deniability. Amelia felt her sanctuary becoming a prison. She stopped, using the pool as much, the joy of it tainted by the feeling of being constantly monitored, judged, and harassed. The stress began to gnaw at her. She was losing sleep. Her work was suffering. She felt more like a cornered animal than a homeowner. The breaking point came on a blistering Saturday in July. Amelia had just closed a massive deal at work, a career-defining achievement. She was exhausted, but exhilarated. She decided that no neighborhood tyrant was going to keep her from enjoying the fruits of her labor. She put on her boldest red bikini, grabbed a bottle of champagne, and marched out to her pool. She'd just popped the cork when Karen's voice sliced through. "The air. Still have no shame, I see." Amelia turned. Karen wasn't peering through the fence this time. She was standing at the gate to Amelia's yard, her hand on the latch. "Get off my property, Karen," Amelia said, her voice low and dangerous. "This has gone on long enough," Karen said, pushing the gate open and taking a step onto the pristine patio stones. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with a frantic, zealous light. "I have warned you. The HOA has warned you. You are a corrupting influence on this community." "You are trespassing," Amelia said, standing up and grabbing her phone from the table. "I'm calling the police. Again." "The police won't help you," Karen sneered. "They know you're the problem. Flaunting your body, your money. You don't belong here." Amelia's finger hovered over the 911 icon. "Last chance, Karen. Leave. Now." Karen's eyes darted around the yard, a flicker of something unhinged in her gaze. "My husband, he looks over here. I see his eyes. You're trying to tempt him. You're a homewrecker." The accusation was so absurd, so delusional, that Amelia almost laughed. "You're insane." "I am a protector of this community. I am a protector of my family." Karen's voice rose to a shriek. She took another step forward, and her hand went to the pocket of her cardigan. When it came out, it was holding a small silver pistol. Amelia froze. The phone felt slick in her suddenly sweaty palm. The champagne bottle on the table seemed a million miles away. The sun was still shining, a bird was still chirping in the magnolia tree, but the entire world had contracted to the small, dark hole at the end of that barrel. "Karen, what are you doing?" Amelia whispered, her voice barely audible. "I'm cleaning up the neighborhood," Karen said, her hand trembling, but her eyes filled with a terrifying certainty. "I'm putting an end to this filth." She raised the gun. Amelia's mind screamed, "Move! Run! Duck!" But her body was locked in, placed by pure, paralyzing terror. The first shot was a deafening crack that echoed off the fence. Amelia felt a searing, white-hot pain in her left shoulder. The force of it spun her around, and she stumbled backward, her heel catching on the edge of the pool. She fell into the water, the cool blue a shocking contrast to the fire spreading through her upper body. She surfaced, gasping, her head fuzzy. The water around her shoulder was blooming with a cloud of crimson. She saw Karen standing at the edge of the pool, the gun still raised, her expression one of shocked triumph. "See what you made me do?" Karen whimpered, the gun wavering. "You made me do this!" Pain and adrenaline surged through Amelia in a dizzying wave. The fear was still there, cold and sharp, but something else was rising with it, a primal, furious will to survive. She was not going to die in her own pool at the hands of this pathetic, deranged woman. Karen took a shaky step back, her eyes wide with the horror of what she'd done. The gun lowered slightly. It was the hesitation Amelia's voiceover had described. The fatal mistake. With a guttural roar, Amelia launched herself out of the shallow end. Water streamed from her body as she lunged, ignoring the agony in her shoulder. She was faster than Karen expected. Before the older woman could react, Amelia's right hand clamped around Karen's wrist, twisting it with all the force her adrenaline-fueled body could muster. Karen shrieked in pain and surprise. The gun clattered onto the patio stones. Amelia kicked it away, sending it skittering under a lounge chair. She shoved Karen hard. The woman, clumsy and off balance, stumbled backward, her arms flailing, and fell into the pool with a great splash. Amelia stood over her, dripping water. The sirens were a distant scream at first, a sound that didn't seem connected to the surreal tableau in Amelia's backyard. Karen, sputtering in the chlorinated water, finally found her footing in the shallow end. Her blonde helmet of hair was a ruined, plastered mess, and her floral dress billowed around her like a morbid water lily. The righteous fury in her eyes had been replaced by a dawning, panicked horror. You attacked me!" she shrieked, her voice hoarse. "Everyone will see! I was defending myself!" Amelia didn't lower the gun. The weight of it was strangely grounding. The pain in her shoulder was a roaring fire, but her mind had never been clearer, honed to a razor's edge by adrenaline and a lifetime of high-stakes negotiation. She kept the barrel pointed safely at the sky, her thumb resting on the safety. Her other hand, slick with a mixture of blood and water, retrieved her phone from the patio table. Her fingers were clumsy, but they worked. She dialed 911. 911, what is your emergency? The operator's voice was calm, detached. I'm at 128 Magnolia Drive in Northwood Estates, Amelia said, her own voice shockingly steady. I have been shot by my neighbor. I have disarmed her. The assailant is contained in my swimming pool. I require police and an ambulance immediately. There was a beat of silence on the other end. Ma'am, you've been shot? Yes, in the left shoulder. The weapon is a small caliber pistol. It is secure in my possession. She's lying, Karen screamed from the pool, scrambling toward the steps. She lured me here. She attacked me. I was scared for my life. Amelia's eyes, cold as chips of ice, pinned Karen to the spot. Stay where you are, she commanded, her voice leaving no room for argument. Karen froze, one hand on the pool steps, her face a mask of disbelief. Ma'am, is the assailant still a threat? The operator asked. No, Amelia said, never taking her eyes off Karen. She is a 58-year-old woman in a swimming pool. I am the one with the gun. The only threat here is that I'm bleeding on my new Italian travertine pavers. The sirens grew louder, converging on her quiet cul-de-sac. The first police car screeched to a halt out front, doors slamming. Within seconds, 2 officers burst through the side gate, guns drawn. Police! Drop the weapon! The lead officer shouted, a stocky man with a thick mustache. Amelia calmly placed the silver pistol on the glass-topped patio table, then raised her hands, the right one clean, the left one dripping red. "The weapon is on the table," she said clearly. "I am Amelia Vance. I am the homeowner. I am the one who has been shot." The officer's eyes darted from Amelia's bleeding shoulder to the gun on the table, then to the pathetic, drenched woman in the pool. Karen saw her chance. "Arrest her!" Karen sobbed, pointing a trembling finger at Amelia. "She's a monster! She tried to seduce my husband. She attacked me when I confronted her. I was just trying to protect my family." The second officer, a younger woman, kept her gun trained on the general scene while the first approached Amelia cautiously. "Ma'am, are you okay? Let me see the wound." "It's a through and through, I think," Amelia said, her voice starting to waver as the adrenaline began to ebb, allowing the pain to rush in. She was standing right there. She gestured to the edge of the pool. Paramedics arrived, pushing a gurney through the gate. As they swarmed Amelia, cutting away the strap of her red bikini top to access the wound, the female officer went to deal with Karen. "Ma'am, I need you to get out of the pool," the officer said. "Not until she's in handcuffs," Karen insisted. "Ma'am, out of the pool now." The officer's voice was firm. As Karen reluctantly climbed the steps, dripping and shivering, a man appeared at the gate. He was tall and stooped, with thinning gray hair and a bewildered expression. It was Karen's husband, Richard, drawn by the commotion. He stared at his wife, wrapped in a towel by the officer, then at Amelia being loaded onto a gurney, her shoulder swathed in bandages. What happened?" Richard stammered, looking at his wife. "She shot me, Richard," Amelia said, from the gurney, her voice clear enough for everyone to hear. "Your wife trespassed on my property, accused me of trying to seduce you, and then shot me with that gun on the table." Richard's face went ashen. He looked from Amelia to the pistol, then back to his wife, whose face had crumpled. The lie was too big, too insane to hold up in the face of a bleeding victim and a smoking gun. "Karen," he whispered, a universe of horrified questions in that single word. "She drove me to it, Richard, with her indecency." Karen's defense was weak, pathetic. The lead officer had picked up the pistol with a gloved hand, bagged it, and was now speaking quietly into his radio. He'd seen the security camera dome under the eaves of Amelia's roof. "We'll need a warrant for your security footage, Ms. Vance," he said. "You won't need one," Amelia replied, gritting her teeth as a paramedic administered a painkiller. "My lawyer will deliver a copy to you personally, just as soon as I hire him." That was the moment Karen seemed to understand it was over. As the officer approached her, pulling out a pair of handcuffs, her righteous indignation finally shattered, leaving only a core of pure, undiluted terror. No, you can't," she whimpered, backing away. "It was a mistake. I didn't mean to." The click of the handcuffs snapping around her wet wrists was the most satisfying sound Amelia had ever heard. Karen was read her Miranda rights, her frantic, tearful protests dissolving into incoherent sobs as she was led, dripping, past her husband's stunned face and out to a waiting patrol car. The last thing Amelia saw before the ambulance doors closed was her fence. The pristine white vinyl fence that had been the source of so much conflict. It looked different now. It no longer felt like a barrier to keep a monster out. It felt like the wall of a fortress, her fortress. The hospital was a blur of fluorescent lights, antiseptic smells, and calm professional voices. The bullet had, as she suspected, passed clean through the fleshy part of her shoulder, missing bone, arteries, and any major nerves. It was incredibly painful and would require stitches and physical therapy, but it was not life-threatening. The physical damage was manageable. The psychological damage, however, had been cauterized and reforged into something else entirely. As she lay in the sterile white room, a morphine drip taking the edge off the searing pain, she didn't call her parents or a friend. She used her one good hand to pull up the contact information for Benjamin Carter. Carter was a legend in corporate law, a shark who specialized in hostile takeovers. He was brilliant, ruthless, and obscenely expensive. He was exactly what she needed. He answered on the second ring. "Amelia, this is unexpected. I trust you're not calling to surrender the Sterling account." "Something better, Ben," Amelia said, her voice a low murmur. "I'm calling to retain you. I've been the victim of an attempted murder, and I'm about to launch the most aggressive, scorched-earth civil suit this state has ever seen." There was a pause. "Go on," Carter said, his voice now laced with intrigued curiosity. Amelia laid it all out with the cold, dispassionate precision of a CEO outlining a quarterly report. The HOA harassment, the drone, the trespassing, the shooting, the arrest. She left out the emotion, the fear, the pain. She gave him only the facts, the weapons he could use. "She has a house, I assume?" Carter asked when she was finished. "Yes, right next to mine. Paid off, from what I can gather. Assets, investments, pension. Her husband is a retired dentist. They're comfortable," Amelia said. "Good," Carter purred. "What do you want, Amelia?" Amelia shifted in the hospital bed, a grim smile touching her lips for the first time. Her gaze drifted to the window, to the suburban landscape outside, a world she had fought to join and would now fight to conquer. "I want her to serve the maximum possible sentence for every charge we can throw at her. I want a restraining order so that if she ever gets out, she can't come within 500 yards of me or my property. I want to sue her for medical expenses, pain and suffering, emotional distress, and punitive damages so high they'll make her grandchildren weep. I want to own her house. I want to own her car. I want to own her ugly little floral dresses." She took a breath, her eyes zeroing in on an imaginary line in the distance. Benjamin Carter's office was a testament to minimalist brutality. All glass, chrome, and black leather, it overlooked the city from the 40th floor, a predator's perch. Carter himself, dressed in a suit so sharp it could have been tailored. From Obsidian, didn't waste time with pleasantries. "The DA is charging her with aggravated assault with a deadly weapon and attempted murder in the second degree," he said, sliding a folder across a vast mahogany desk toward Amelia. "The trespassing charge is a given. With the video evidence, the criminal case is a slam dunk. She'll do time. Our job is to make sure that by the time she gets out, she has nothing left but the clothes on her back and a lifetime of regret." Amelia, her arm in a sleek black sling that looked more like a fashion accessory than a medical device, picked up the folder. Her shoulder ached with a dull, persistent fire, a constant reminder of the violation. "What's the first move?" "The first move was made an hour ago," Carter said, a thin, carnivorous smile playing on his lips. "We filed a civil suit against Karen and Richard Becker. We're seeking $10 million in punitive and compensatory damages. We also filed a LIS pendens on their property, which means they can't sell or transfer the title. It's frozen. Paralyzed, just like their bank accounts will be by noon today." He leaned forward, his eyes gleaming. "This isn't about a negotiation, Amelia. This is about annihilation. We will not settle. We will take everything. The discovery process will be a proctological exam of their entire financial and personal history. It will be invasive, humiliating, and relentless." While Carter launched his legal blitzkrieg, Richard Becker was navigating a very different legal world. He'd hired the only lawyer he could find on short notice, a man named Stan Gable, whose office was in a strip mall and smelled faintly of stale coffee and desperation. "It's a he said, she said," Stan said, leaning back in his creaky chair. "We'll paint you as the victim, Karen, a pillar of the community, terrified by a provocative newcomer. We'll say you feared for your safety." "But she has a video," Richard mumbled, his face pale and drawn. He hadn't slept in 2 days. "Video can be misleading." Stan waved a dismissive hand. "Deep fakes, clever editing. We'll cast doubt. The key is to get you out on bail and back in your home. A jury won't convict a sweet grandmother who's sleeping in her own bed." The bail hearing was a circus. The small courtroom was packed with Northwood residents, their faces a mixture of morbid curiosity and nervous apprehension. The HOA board members sat in a tight, anxious cluster in the front row. Stan Gable, looking rumpled and out of his depth, made a passionate plea for a low bail, citing Karen's spotless record and deep community ties. Mrs. Becker is a churchgoer, a volunteer, the head of the neighborhood welcome committee, he intoned. She is not a flight risk. She is a frightened woman who made a terrible mistake. The assistant district attorney, a sharp young woman named Maria Flores, stood up. She didn't have a speech. She had a tablet. "Your Honor," she said calmly, "the state would like to present Exhibit A." She turned the tablet toward the judge. On the screen, the footage from Amelia's security camera played out in stark, high-definition clarity. The courtroom was silent, watching the scene unfold. Karen trespassing, her face contorted with rage. Amelia, calm and stationary. Karen pulling the gun, the flash. Amelia falling into the pool. Flores then turned the tablet so the jury and the gallery could see. A collective gasp went through the room. The video was undeniable. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a cold-blooded attack. The judge, a stern-faced man who had seen everything, looked down at Karen, who was trembling in her orange jumpsuit. His expression was one of utter disgust. "A frightened woman?" the judge said, his voice dripping with scorn. "Mr. Gable, I saw a woman commit a violent felony in broad daylight. I saw a woman who is a clear and present danger to the community. She supposedly serves." He banged his gavel. "Bail is set at $2 million, cash only." Stan Gable's jaw dropped. Richard Becker looked like he'd been punched in the stomach. $2 million in cash was impossible. They didn't have it. Karen was not coming home. The news of the bail hearing and the damning video spread through Northwood like a wildfire. The narrative Karen had tried to spin, of a victim defending her neighborhood's morality, was incinerated. She was no longer a misunderstood protector. She was a villain, a Karen, in the most extreme sense, a national news caricature of suburban entitlement and rage. That evening, Benjamin Carter made his next move. He didn't just leak the video, he gave an exclusive interview to a national news network, framing the story perfectly. "This wasn't just an attack on my client, Amelia Vance," Carter said, looking directly into the camera with an expression of somber gravity. "It was an attack on every American's right to be safe and secure in their own home. It was the terrifying culmination of a campaign of harassment, not just by one disturbed individual, but one that was enabled and implicitly endorsed by a negligent and complicit homeowners association." He let that sink in before delivering the killing blow. "We will be naming the Northwood Estates HOA as a co-defendant in our civil suit. Their failure to act, their endorsement of Mrs. Becker's campaign of intimidation through their so-called decency board, makes them just as culpable as the woman who pulled the trigger. We will hold them accountable." The HOA board members watched the broadcast from their respective living rooms, the blood draining from their faces. Their little fiefdom, built on rules about lawn height and mailbox colors, was about to be dragged into a multi-million-dollar lawsuit against one of the most feared lawyers in the country. The panic was immediate. For Amelia, the victory was intoxicating, but it was only a start. The real prize was next door. Richard Becker sat in his silent, empty house. The place felt cavernous without Karen's bustling, anxious energy. He had spent the day on the phone with bankers and the emergency meeting of the Northwood Estates HOA was held not in their usual clubhouse conference room, but in the cramped beige office of their terrified insurance broker. The 5 board members sat around a small table, sweating under the fluorescent lights as the broker, a man named Jerry, delivered the bad news. "Your directors and officers' liability policy is comprehensive," Jerry said, wiping his brow with a handkerchief. It covers errors, omissions, poor judgment, but it has an exclusion clause for willful misconduct and gross negligence. Benjamin Carter's entire case is built on the argument that the board, by empowering Karen Becker and ignoring a pattern of harassment, was grossly negligent. If he proves that, and frankly, it looks like he can, the policy is void. You're on your own. A wave of nausea washed over the room. These were people who fretted over unapproved garden gnomes and the precise shade of beige for exterior trim. They were not equipped to fight a legal battle that could cost them their homes, their retirement savings, their entire lives. "What do we do?" asked the HOA president, a retired sales manager named Bob. "You surrender," Jerry said, flatly. "Unconditionally. You give Amelia Vance whatever she wants. It's your only hope." While the HOA crumbled, Richard Becker made the grim pilgrimage to the county jail. The visiting room was a cacophony of shouted conversations and crying children, separated by thick, scratched plexiglass. When Karen was led out in her orange jumpsuit, she looked smaller, older. The rigid certainty that had defined her was gone, replaced by a twitchy, paranoid fear. "You have to get me out of here, Richard," she said, her voice raspy through the static-filled phone receiver. "That woman, she's framing me. She edited that video. She's a witch. She's turned everyone against me." Richard stared at his wife of 35 years. He had hoped to see some remorse, some flicker of understanding of the catastrophe she had caused. Instead, he saw only a mind that had retreated so far into its own delusions that it could no longer perceive reality. She wasn't a victim. She was the architect of her own ruin, and she was determined to drag him down with her. "The lawyer said there's nothing we can do," he said, his voice hollow. "The video it's clear, Karen." "You don't believe me either?" she shrieked, her eyes welling with tears of self-pity. "After all I did to protect you? To protect our home?" "You destroyed our home, Karen," he said, the words tasting like ash. He hung up the phone, turned, and walked away, leaving, her screaming his name into a dead receiver. He knew in that moment that his marriage was over. The woman he had loved was gone, replaced by a stranger in an orange jumpsuit. He returned home to a new, final humiliation. A bright red "for sale" sign was hammered into his award-winning lawn. The bank, in conjunction with his now useless lawyer, had advised him that selling the house was his only option to cover the astronomical legal fees and the inevitable civil judgment. He hadn't even been consulted on the realtor. Amelia saw the sign go up from her home office window. She picked up her phone and made a call. "Carter," she said, "the house is on the market. It's time." The next day, a formal offer was delivered to the HOA board. It was a settlement agreement drafted by Carter, and it was as brutal as it was brilliant. Amelia Vance would agree to drop the HOA from the civil suit in exchange for 3 things. First, the immediate and permanent dissolution of the Decency and Aesthetics Board. Second, a formal public letter of apology to Ms. Vance, to be mailed to every resident of Northwood Estates and published in the local paper, admitting their negligence. And third, the HOA was to cede all ownership, rights, and control over the 6-foot white vinyl fence located on the property line between 126 and 128 Magnolia Drive to Amelia Vance in perpetuity. The fence would become her sole private property. The board signed it without a single amendment. The cost of a public apology and a meaningless fence was infinitely preferable to financial ruin. That evening, Richard Becker saw the email from the HOA announcing the settlement. They had abandoned him. They had thrown him and Karen to the wolves to save themselves, and they had given her the fence, the symbol of the entire conflict. The wall Karen had tried to turn into a weapon now belonged to Amelia. The irony was a physical blow. He couldn't take it anymore. Driven by a desperate last-ditch hope, he walked out his front door, across his lawn, and up to Amelia's front door. He rang the bell. She opened it herself. She was no longer wearing the sling. She looked healthy, strong, and utterly implacable. "Mr. Becker," she said, her voice neutral. "Please," he began, his voice cracking. "You have to stop this. You've won. Karen is in jail. We're ruined. We're losing our house. What more do you want?" "What do I want?" Amelia repeated, her expression unreadable. She looked past him, at his beautiful home. The home he and Karen had spent decades building. The home that was now just another asset to be liquidated. "I want your house," she said, her voice soft, but laced with the hardness of forged steel. Richard stared at her, uncomprehending. "What?" "My lawyer is preparing an offer," she explained calmly, as if discussing a simple business transaction. "It will be an all-cash offer, well below your asking price. It will be just enough to cover your legal fees and the initial settlement. Payment to me. It will leave you with nothing. But it will also clear your debt. It's a clean break. You'll be forced to take it. There won't be any other offers, not on a property so infamous." The full, horrifying scope of her plan, finally, dawned on him. She wasn't just satisfied with ruining them. She wanted to occupy their space, to erase them. She wanted to sleep in their bedroom, eat in their kitchen, and swim in her pool while looking out over the yard that had once been theirs. It was the ultimate act of conquest. "You're a monster," he whispered, the words catching in his throat. Amelia's face, for the first time, showed a flicker of emotion. It was a cold, grim satisfaction. "Your wife shot me in my own pool because she didn't like my bathing suit," she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "She tried to murder me over a matter of taste. You stood by and did nothing, while she harassed me for weeks. Don't you dare talk to me about monsters." She stepped back and closed the door in his face, the soft click of the lock echoing the final, definitive end of his life as he knew it. The day of Karen Becker's sentencing was gray and overcast, the sky a flat, unforgiving sheet of metal. Amelia sat in the front row of the courtroom, directly behind the prosecutor's table. She wore a tailored navy blue dress, her posture perfect, her expression unreadable. She was not there for vengeance. She was there for closure, to witness the final, formal consequence of Karen's actions. Karen, looking gaunt and broken in her prison-issue clothing, was a ghost of her former self. Her lawyer, Stan Gable, offered a rambling, pathetic plea for leniency, citing his client's age and supposed mental distress. But the judge was unmoved. "Karen Becker," he said, his voice echoing in the silent courtroom. "You were not a protector of your community. You were a predator. You cloaked your personal animosity and prejudice in the guise of neighborhood standards, and when you did not get your way, you resorted to a level of violence that is shocking and unacceptable." He looked directly at her. "You did not just shoot your neighbor, Mrs. Becker. You shot a hole in the fabric of a community that is supposed to feel safe. You shattered the sanctity of a person's own home." The sentence was delivered without ceremony. "For the charge of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, I sentence you to 10 years in the state penitentiary. For the charge of attempted murder, I sentence you to 15 years. The sentences will run concurrently. You will be eligible for parole in 12 years. A strangled sob escaped Karen's lips. It was the sound of a life ending. Richard, sitting, alone on the other side of the courtroom, slumped in his seat, a man hollowed out by his wife's choices. He didn't even look at Amelia as she stood and walked out, her face a mask of calm composure. She had Karen's freedom. It was locked. Away, securely, for more than a decade. 2 weeks later, the closing on the house was held in Benjamin Carter's sterile conference room. Richard Becker sat across the vast mahogany table, his shoulders stooped. He slid a single key across the polished surface. Amelia didn't take it. She simply nodded at her lawyer, who picked it up and placed it in a crisp new envelope. The transaction was complete. She had taken Karen's house. That Saturday, Amelia didn't go to her new, empty property. Instead, she stood on her own patio, looking at the white vinyl fence. It was hers now. Legally, irrevocably hers. A work crew arrived, men in dusty jeans and heavy boots. They didn't carry saws or sledgehammers. They carried shovels and crowbars. Following Amelia's precise instructions, they began to dig. They didn't tear the fence down. They carefully, methodically, uninstalled it, panel by panel, post by post. They lifted each section out of the ground, leaving behind nothing but a thin, dark scar in the manicured grass. They loaded the entire fence onto a flatbed truck. Amelia paid them in cash, and they drove away. The barrier that had defined the conflict, the symbol of Karen's obsession, was simply gone. The 2 yards now flowed into one another, creating a vast, open expanse of green under the afternoon sun. The final piece of her plan arrived an hour later, a landscaping crew with a truck full of mature, 10-foot-tall magnolia trees. They planted them along the now invisible property line, not as a barrier, but as a beautiful natural border that would fill the air with fragrance every spring. The next day was Sunday. It was hot, the sky a brilliant cloudless blue. Amelia walked out to her pool. The air felt different, lighter. The space felt immense. Her property no longer felt like a defended territory, but an expansive, peaceful estate. She dove into the cool, clear water, the silence broken only by the gentle lapping against the sides. She floated on her back, just as she had on that first day, the sun warm on her skin. She looked at her new magnolia trees, their glossy leaves rustling in the breeze. She looked across the seamless lawn to the empty house on the hill. Her house. Now, a silent testament to her victory. She had taken the gun, and with it, the power to be a victim. She had taken the fence, and with it, the very concept of a barrier between them. And she had taken Karen's freedom, ensuring her own peace. A small, genuine smile touched Amelia's lips. The water was perfect, the sun was warm, and for the first time in a long time, she felt completely and utterly safe in her own backyard. The war was over. The sanctuary was restored.